All right, so when we last were talking about some of this stuff, we mentioned that spices are going to be a major motivator for the Europeans to go exploring. What sort of spices are we talking about? What do I mean by spices? Any ideas? That's actually number one. Pepper is the most commonly traded spice in the world. Think about eating food without any salt in it first. Think of how bland and flavorless everything would taste. Like popcorn's a great example. Like popcorn without butter or salt. It's basically styrofoam at that point. But salt adds a little something something. Pepper is something that Europeans have never experienced before. And when they do, they love it. Salt and pepper is so ubiquitous that every table is expected to have it nowadays. Almost everything that's a meat dish, any dish at all, salt and pepper to taste. And India, as you'll notice, way over here, is producing these spices and to export it. That means you've got these long overland trade routes and over the sea before it gets to Europe. So by the time it gets to, say, somewhere like France, it stopped through many individual little towns and cities, and all the while you're paying taxes on these goods. So by the time you actually get to your destination, it's worth more than gold. So it's incredibly expensive. If you can figure out a way to circumvent this, circumvent the Arabs and the Turks and get straight to the source, then that means all this money you would be spending on taxes now can just go into your pocket as profit. So it's going to be hugely profitable to find a way there. So this first excerpt of discovery that we see in Europe is going to be aimed at taking advantage of this idea of spices. Now the thing is, though, this wasn't really possible before the Renaissance, not for Europe. And the reason has to do largely with technology. First of all, do you all remember when I talked to you guys about the caravel, the ship design that allowed exploration to happen? The reason for this basically is the ship construction, one-on-one. So first of all, one of the aspects of the caravel, you imagine it's kind of a boat shape, like so, is that it's got a narrow draft, meaning that it doesn't sit too deeply in the water. Why that matters is the keel, which is kind of this protrusion that happens like so. That's a very, very small keel. You can kind of see what I'm talking about. What that does is provide stability. So deep keel or a deep draft means that you're a very stable ship. You're not going to be pulled over very easily. However, the problem with that is if you try to get really close to the coast, you're probably going to bump something. You're going to either go aground or even tear a big hole in the bottom of your ship, which causes it to sink, which is bad form. So we want this to stay near the coast. Why? We'll explain that here in a second. Then you got your rudder, which you kind of got this little thing sticking out. And then you've got this area comes up here, this area comes up here. And then you've got this giant mast, right? Well, in truth, caravels had two masts. And what this allows you to do is hang different kinds of sails. Now, for the most part, European sails, like for instance, if you have like a Viking boat type thing, it's going to basically be one mast and a giant square. And that's good for power. Square sails have a lot of surface area, so it's going to catch a lot of wind. The problem, though, is angling. Whenever you're going against the wind, like so, we'll go down here, space. The wind's coming this way, you can't just sail directly into it. You're just going to be blown backwards. So the way you do that is you do what's called tacking. You sail at a zigzag, sort of shape like that. Triangular sails, like you see in Arab ships, are much better at that sort of thing. So you kind of have more or less this mixed sail design. That's going to come over here to this long part that's called the bowsprit, and then you're going to have a nice big square sail there. So that allows you to angle and tack and do what you got to do. So all of these things contribute to the type of sailing that we're going to be doing. However, that's not really our biggest problem. It's one of the major problems. The other major problem I deal with has to do with navigation. Let me kind of do this. So let's talk navigation for a second. All right. So the Greeks and the Romans, these guys who are sailing around here, do you guys know how they navigated? How they knew where they were? They sailed really close to the coast because you can see it going by and know more or less where you're at. You know, running into other boats, things like that. Where are we? Explain this, and that's how you go along. It's just like driving. You know, hit landmarks, that sort of thing. Are there many landmarks in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean? Not so much. By the way, remember how we said it's important to be next to the coast? You know, that's why we have that narrow draft. That's why. The other thing is going out in the open ocean. Now, here's how they did it on board Columbus' ship. First of all, we have a new technology introduced from China through Arabia, and that's the compass, the magnetic compass. So, what does this let us figure out? North, south, east, and west, yes? Okay, so this is how you navigate on a ship. You need a few pieces of equipment. First, you need a map. You need a compass. And you need what's called a dead reckoning board. Have you guys ever heard the expression dead reckoning? Usually refers to close or close enough. Well, a dead reckoning board basically looks a lot like a dartboard. It's divided into little sections like this. And what it showed us were the cardinal directions. More or less, we have north, south, east, and west. And then we could also go northeast, southeast, southwest, and northwest. And we can actually even finally divide it such as north by northwest, or northwest by west, or kind of further cutting in half. So here's what you do. There were little holes drilled in this, sort of like a Cracker Barrel game with the tees, you know, the golf tee game. Okay, it's like that. And what you do is you have your compass, and let's say that we are sailing, and this is our home port right here, and we need to get all the way over here, okay? So if I'm plotting a course, and keep in mind this is really simplistic, I know how fast my boat can go. The way I figure that out is I have what's called a leadsman. He's got this big heavy weight. He's going to throw overboard. It's going to be caught. And well, it's actually not that heavy, I think, but it's more like a kite, a wooden kite. And the waves catch it, and as it's going, he's counting. And as long as I can figure out my speed, I can figure out the rest. Which doing speed is quite easy. You just count the number of knots. It's a your hand after a certain period of time. That's how many knots you're going, how many nautical miles. So let's say our boat goes 8 nautical miles per hour. Speedy ship. Okay, so I know if I'm traveling in one direction for 1 hour, I have traveled how far? If I'm going 8 miles per hour, I go 8 miles. Yes, exactly, 8 nautical miles. So here's how it works. I've got an hourglass. All right. So I'm going to tell the helmsman I need to sail. Let's check our dead reckoning board. Southeast. Set the course southeast. And he does so. And I turn over my hourglass. And after 1 hour's time, I can look at my map and measure it out. And if I've traveled southeast by, say, that much, that's 8 miles away, this is where we are. So because I'm saying the helmsman southeast, on the first little notch on the board, I'm going to put, well, a little wooden peg in. Okay, so I'm still a little bit north of my target, but I also need to come far more east. So I'm going to say next knot we're going to do is going to be east. Okay? So again, we travel along, and I measure that it puts us right about there. Okay? So, ooh, hello. Short. Okay, good. So my next point is going to put me, right along here. And I mark it. And then the next again, maybe I'll come here, and here, and here, and I'm plotting my course all the way around and get there. Why the board? Well, the reason is what if I have to take a break? You know? This allows the next navigator to look and say, okay, this is where we've been, this is what we did, and keep track of it. Okay? And this allows us to navigate. How accurate is that? Not really. Because here's the problem. What does the ocean do? It moves. This would be great if it was a perfectly smooth ocean of glass that we just kind of scoot around up, but it's not. The current is going to push us different directions, so we can be wildly inaccurate. What happens if I'm wrong in my calculations? Well, it's all different things. It can place us in a wrong place. That's why they allegedly call it dead reckoning, because if I'm wrong, we're all dead. So, the Arabs had another technology for navigating that they're going to use in addition to this. And this is called the astrolabe. It was originally did by the Greeks, but they kind of perfected it. And the way it works is there's an arm with sights on it. You're going to hold it up to your eye at night and line it up with a celestial body. And what's interesting about this, now keep in mind, I am not a naval navigator, so if I'm horribly wrong and there's somebody who's in the Navy who's going to go, he's all wrong, I'm sorry, you can send me an email if that's totally correct. But, because I actually would like to know this, because it's kind of interesting stuff. So basically, let's we have our boat here. Here's how this works. Let's say we have the North Star right there. We know it stays straight, yes? Here's what we need. Let's say we have, and actually you can do this without this, and this is the easiest way, so this will happen. We have a landmark. So say we're coming around Cape Horn, which is down here in South America. Okay, so I know where it is. I can line up my sights, everything. Basically, we connect the dots. From the ship to the star, from the star to the landmark, from the landmark back to the ship where we just made. And using the Pythagorean theorem, another aspect of geometry, we can figure out the angles, we can figure out the distance, like so. And that also helps us to figure out our angle of latitude. Latitude by degrees. In addition to this, we can use it to figure out longitude. That's a little bit trickier though. Longitude is much harder, and we can place this off pretty dramatically even using correct math. So that's going to remain a bit of a question related to the 16th century. In truth, nowadays, longitude is the easiest thing to figure out. And the reason is, the way you calculate longitude is if you know what time it is back at your home port, and you know what time it is on the ship, whatever the difference is, for every 4 minutes, it's 1 degree of longitude. So if you know what longitude everything like that, you can figure it out really easily. The problem is clocks. Accurate clocks really didn't exist until the 16th century. They existed, but they're really kind of wildly imprecise. They had to be wound, and in some cases, repowered with water, things like that. And they can be off by several hours, which would be hugely off track at sea. So a guy named George Harrison ends up inventing the first really accurate clock, and this is going to dramatically change everything. In fact, the whole story behind it is fascinating because this guy ends up going about this. Basically, what happened is that England at the time had this prize. So basically, they said, whoever can figure out a good way to figure out longitude, we will give, make a very wealthy person. So he comes up with this clock idea, and it's like way better than everyone else. Like some people had this idea. All right, here's what we're going to do. We are going to have a cannon in a bell tower that we're going to set the time. And at noon every single day, they're going to fire off a cannon. And we're going to have rafts that go all the way around the world, and they're each going to fire the cannon shot when they hear the cannon shot. You're like, who's going to feed the guys in the rafts? Doesn't work very well. This idea is practical and is the basis of modern, not really modern thinking, I suppose, but definitely an important, contribution. It's cool stuff. They actually did a movie based off of it called Longitude, if anyone's interested in that. So this is what we're going to do. These technologies, which come out because of the Renaissance, make everything else possible. So the So the Crusades are what get us the interest, and then it's going to be the Renaissance which gives us the technology. Because the fact is the Europeans want to get around these Arabs and Turks. So who is the first guys to do it? Who is that kind of sets the stage for this? It's going to be the Portuguese. Excuse me. So we're going to run into some interesting things here. As I said, spices are becoming popular. The amount of excuse me, the effect that spices have on our everyday lives is pretty important. I mean, think about it. Spices go into deodorants. Spices go into food. Spices go into all sorts of wonderful things that make our lives so much easier. Now, let's say that you were going to jump on board ship. Well, here's kind of an interesting little article. If you go to chapter 3, section 1, and this little graph is, actually, hang on before I get there, there's a really cool diagram of the caravel on page 97. The thing I was talking about is page 98, a ship's supply rations. Because here's the thing is, the trip between Lisbon, Portugal, and Mumbai, India, is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 11 months, one way. Here's the amount of food that they would have taken on a 3-month journey. So this is a third, more or less, of the way. Well, going like a quarter of the way. But here you go. A ship's rations. The captain of a 17th century sailing vessel with a crew of 190 sailors would normally order the following food items for a 3-month trip. 8,000 pounds of salt beef, 2,800 pounds of salt pork, 600 pounds of salt cod, and some beef tongues. Yummy, yummy. Now, why salted? Yeah. Absolutely. There's no refrigeration. So keep in mind, this is what we have to eat in this period of time before it goes bad. Now, I don't know if you guys have ever had a really, really salty diet, but it means you have to drink a whole lot to kind of offset it. So we'll get to that here in a second. What else are we going to take with us? 15,000 brown biscuits, 5,000 white biscuits. You guys know what the difference between brown and white biscuits are? Basically, the grains going into it. But in addition to that, we're not talking like biscuits as in the yummy, delicious things you get from Cracker Barrel. These are hardtack biscuits or ship's biscuits. Hardtack is, if you've never encountered before, a type of preserved bread that has no leavening in it. So basically, he makes it with flour, water, and salt. That's it. And whenever you bake, you dock it, poke holes everywhere on, and get every bit of moisture onto it, and then it lasts for years. As in, I heard recently of a guy who found one from the Civil War. He ate it, and it was still preserved fine. Now, whenever you're eating hardtack, here's the issue. It's very, very hard. Not like jawbreaker hard as in break your teeth, but it is hard enough that you really can't chew it very well. So the way that some people do it is you break off a chunk or cut a chunk off with a knife, stick it in your jaw, kind of your cheek, and let like your spit kind of like reconstitute into something somewhat chewable. I never liked it that way personally. If you're eating for breakfast, I find the best thing is you dip it in coffee and let sort of like a donut, and you let like the coffee soak in to give it some flavor. The other option is if you're having for lunch, you might have like some kind of like stew or soup. You break it into chunks and make like little dumplings out of it. That's actually pretty good because then the salt kind of goes into your food, kind of like the salt in it, so that works out pretty well. We also have 30 bushels of oatmeal, 40 bushels of dried peas, and 1.5 bushels of mustard seed. Why mustard seed? Flavor. Again. When we're talking about flavors that are preserved, you guys know how we tend to flavor foods in European food? Fat. Fat doesn't keep very well, though. So, salt and mustard. Good stuff. Here's the thing, though. Oatmeal. Have you guys ever had just plain oatmeal? I don't mean like, oatmeal like you get with like maple and bread. No, I mean oatmeal. Oats and water. It tastes terrible. It's like cardboard. So then, what are we going to do to flavor it? Well, the next thing here, 11 small wooden casks of butter. Butter. That is flavor. Doesn't last very long, though, so we also have some vinegar. Not quite, but then again, vinegar can be well done in different ways, whatever. But this is your breakfast. Here, what you're going to do is you're going to take your dried peas, which I mentioned previously, and you're going to mix that with your beef or something like that. And you're going to make basically kind of almost like a stew type thing. Although another thing that's very common is what's called peas porridge. Have you guys ever heard of that before, peas porridge? There's a little line that goes along with it. It's something along the lines of peas porridge in a pot, peas porridge cold, peas porridge something 5 days old. And basically it's because you make it, you have it breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and you have a little bit over, just add more to it, just kind of keep it going, keep the pot stirring. And there you go. And if you've never had peas porridge, it basically tastes like mashed potatoes, which is actually great in my book. I love mashed potatoes. The only thing is it's green. That's kind of weird. But it's got some nice flavor elements to it because you've got your mustard, you throw in the peas and things. So it's tasty. But when you have that every single day, it gets a bit old. You can imagine being a sailor on one of these things. And we've got all these stories of sailors when they get somewhere, they like immediately hunt whatever they can find. These dudes ate things like, seriously? Like, like rats on some occasions, snakes, crocodile, periwinkle, like sea creatures. They're like, oh, don't eat that. This is why, by the way, that the dodo bird went extinct. Because they had the poor luck of being delicious, stupid, and flightless. So sailors just ate the ever-living nonsense out of these birds, and pretty much anything else they could handle, because you can imagine eating this for months. Like, oh my God, just whatever, okay. So food, big deal, yes? Let's talk what you're going to drink. 10,500 gallons of beer, 500 gallons of water. That's a third less. Way more beer. Why? Yeah, exactly. Leave water in a cask for a long period of time, it gets skunky and gross and disgusting. Beer, on the other hand, not so much. Remember, guys, even today, water is dangerous. The fact that we live in a country where you can turn on the tap and have clean water is an amazing thing. There are many places where if you drink water, it will kill you. Waterborne illnesses, particulates, pollution, all these things. Guys, 71% of the world is water, but only 10% of that is fresh water. Of that 10%, the vast majority of it is less than 1% you can actually drink on its own, no problems. So we're talking a significant problem there. So why is that better for you? Why does that keep you from dying of waterborne illnesses? Yeah. Well, that's true. The alcohol in itself kills the bacteria, things like that. But there's another thing that's very interesting. Beer is actually very, very sterile stuff. First of all, if you're making it, you sterilize everything with cleaning agents, and then you boil it twice. What does boiling water do? All the bacteria and everything in it. It's the same thing that soldiers, when they were running around fighting wars at this time, in Europe would also often be given tea or coffee. Coffee was really more of an American thing, but tea especially, because what do you do when you make tea and coffee? Boil the water. It was healthier before you drink water. In addition, they would take 2 large casks of cider. Cider, by the way, if you say the word cider, in most places in the world, they're not talking about that apple stuff you make around October with cinnamon and what have you in it. We're talking about alcoholic cider, hard cider, as you would. Pear cider, apple cider, all these different types of things. Again, alcohol kept you alive. This is why, incidentally, in the United States, it's a protected right for every citizen to make their own alcohol. I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but in the state of Kentucky, you're allowed to brew 50 gallons of beer per person per household. Harper counts. In addition, 35 gallons of wine per person per year. 15 gallons of spirits per person per year. Alcohol was something that the British wanted to did tax. So this was a right that was protected with the Commonwealth Congress and later the establishment of the United States. So this was a big deal. This was 3 months. Imagine how much this weighs, just the beer alone. Water, which beer mostly is, weighs about 8 pounds per gallon. So you can do the math, 10,500 gallons, a little more than 85,000 pounds for just what you're drinking. So this is incredibly heavy. The reason that this is important is, as I've established, 11 months to Mumbai. How are we going to survive the trip? Well, the way it's proposed is the Portuguese prince, Henry, who we call the Navigator, comes up with this idea of setting up outposts along Africa and then on the other side in order to allow us to basically make pit stops, sort of like you would do stopping at a gas station. So the Europeans are going to seek a way to do this, and as I said, Portugal was going to lead the way. Now, the reason behind that, there's a few reasons, but one of the simplest ones, and easiest to explain, is geography. Who's the farthest away, and thus has to pay the most in taxes and goods, from the spice trades? Portugal. So they have a vested interest in this, as well as they're developing as a nation. They're fighting wars. They need to find a way around these Arabs. And so they propose, through Henry the Navigator and others, to sail south around Africa. Okay? So Henry the Navigator is only good about right here on the map, maybe a quarter of the way. And he's setting up outposts along the way, which are basically fortresses where you'd have guys trading with the Africans and Bedouins in the north and groups like this to take on supplies. These are going to be important later with the establishment of the transatlantic slave trade. So they're building up these forts, and they're going to be moving around. And this is where sailing vessels could stop and trade for what they needed to take on fresh water and other supplies to make these trips possible. Think of it as like, a gas station if you're going on a road trip. Sometimes you just need a beverage, some snacks. Get you some Mountain Dew throwback and a bag of Skittles or something, which is the most delicious thing on earth. Oh my goodness. So you're going to make your way all the way around the Cape and move along. Which brings us to some of the people you should know. First and foremost is Henry the Navigator. He's actually the Prince of Portugal, and this is sort of one of his hobbies. As we saw with the Prince, educated individuals would have knowledge of all sorts of different things. This is one of the things he does. And he contributes largely to this discovery. He proposed this idea and starts the project rolling. It's not going to be until we get down to Vasco Nunez de Balboa and Vasco da Gama that we start making actual progress. That we're going to get all the way to India, and as established, it's a 10-month trip. You might notice I said 11 months earlier. Well, that's because we have got some trading to do. So as is established, food is hard to come by. It's an 11-month trip both ways. So we're talking basically 2 years. And sailing on a ship is not easy work. I mean, I'm talking heavy labor. You're constantly shifting the sails high up. It's dangerous work. It's hot. You're out in the middle of the ocean with zero coverage from the sun. So if it gets hot, it's hot. You're at the mercy of the weather. You're constantly cold and wet at night. I mean, this is a really crappy life. So who in their right mind would sign up for it? Mostly young men. And if you think about it, partially that's because of the adventure of it all. You're going to go boldly where no one has gone before. Sorry, Star Trek reference there. And moreover, the average person, if you remember, isn't going to move more than 10 miles away from their house. You're going to go 3,000 miles. Talk about that. See all kinds of crazy things, foods that no one could have imagined. Experience new things, bring back pets from exotic places like monkeys and things like that. And we're talking about a crazy life, these people, this wistful sense of adventure. And then let's talk the paycheck. Imagine the amount of wealth you're bringing back. And whenever you pay sailors, you pay them in a percentage of what we sell. So this money, you're going to be making a huge amount, and you're going to get a cut of that. So the more stuff that gets back, the better your money's going to be, and you're going to get it all at once. Imagine getting your entire year's paycheck times 2 all at one time. You don't have to pay bills. You're not paying for your food. You're not paying for your clothes. That's paid for by the ship. So you get back, you've got all this money, and you've got zero responsibilities. Oh my gosh. Some dudes actually ended up basically renting a room in a bar, and they stayed there till they ran out of money. Basically partied for their life while they were in ports. Others had families. Imagine what that would be like. I'm going to leave my family for 2 years. Come back. You have a kid, 2 years old. Oh, hi, child I didn't know I had, never met before. Hi, Dad. How does that work? Not to mention, the amount of money coming in is like you've got to seriously budget that to make it work. The other thing is that guys could use this to impress lady friends. You could live way over your. And think about what a teenager would do with like 60 grand. It's in their pocket. The stupid crap they would buy. It would be unfreaking believable. By the way, this is why you don't get a credit card when you go to college. Dead serious. I knew a guy who was like, I'm going to buy a brand new speaker and buy a new car every other week. Hugely in debt later. Let's figure out a way to pay that off. Got it sorted. It's fine now. It's like, you're an idiot. What are you doing? So, be cautious. Credit cards are bad for you whenever you have none of those things. But anyways, moving on. So this is something that happened, and there was a huge incentive to do this because adventure, excitement, lots of money at the end, and then when you spend it all, get back on a ship and do it all over again. And I'm not to say that everything about life was terrible. Sailors, like any other job, complained about their work. They also had friendships, camaraderie amongst each other. One of the things I think is coolest is what happens if someone dies. His share is absorbed by the rest of the crew. He doesn't get a share anymore. What if he has a wife? Oops. Here's what his friends would do. First, every sailor had a sea chest, basically about the size of the recycling bin over there. And that's what everything had to fit in. So he lived light. Well, first his friends would open up a sea chest, pull everything out. Any money they would set aside. Okay? If there was any incriminating letters to say maybe he has multiple spouses or something like that, just tear that up, throw it overboard, and put the pocket. That doesn't exist. Any basically embarrassing contraband, put that away. Everything else, they would actually hold an auction at the mainmast, which is kind of the meeting center for all the sailors, where they would sell all his possessions. All that money they would then bundle up and send back home to their now widow. It was a form of life insurance. It was called the Sailor's Guild. They had each other's backs. So it developed a sense of camaraderie. So not only say it was all doom and gloom, but it's like anything else. It's this, and you kind of make it work. That's kind of exciting. Yeah.
Random question, but when a sailor died, would they just throw his body overboard?
Yep. However, we'll find exemptions to that. For instance, when we get to Napoleonic Wars, we'll talk about Horatio Nelson, who still is a national hero of Britain. When he died at the Battle of Trafalgar, they were not going to throw a national hero overboard, so how do we preserve the body? Remember we were talking about how alcohol preserves things? They dumped them in a cask of wine, basically. Jolly's like, what if they got that mixed up with the stuff that they drink? Ah! It's like one of those little cans with big snakes in it, But that did happen. But most of the time, yeah, it tossed them overboard. Which actually, in Catholicism, is kind of interesting because the whole idea that you will re-inhabit your body when God comes back to earth. How does that work with the sea? Well, the sea basically will give up their dead. So, interesting thing. And we'll talk more about sailor stuff later because I find it fascinating, but we kind of got to move on, and we'll do it before the play on. Anyway, moving on. So, this is the list of people we need to know. Let's see. That's not working so well. So, we'll go this way. Boom, 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 boom. Oops. So first, we talk about Henry the Navigator. He's the guy who proposes it. Bartolomé Diaz. He is going to be the first one that actually proves it's possible by sailing around Cape. of Good Hope. And then Vasco da Gama was going to be the first guy to actually do it, to go the distance. Sorry, I'm giving my voice just a little bit of break. It was a whole lot of like, So, oh, apricot tea, delicious. So here's the thing is, the Portuguese do it. They succeed. They start bringing huge amounts of money back. This is actually going to eventually spark kind of a conflict between the various East India companies, which you'll catch up in your reading tonight. But basically, the Dutch and the Spanish and the English and the French, they all had what was called an East India Trading Company. This is a company that basically acted as almost a government. They could raise taxes, they could raise their own armies, and they fought wars amongst each other over control of the East India trade. So we're talking about a significant amount of competition for this area. Now let's talk for a second. You guys know Christopher Columbus, yes? In 1492, he sailed the ocean blue. Absolutely. And what happens is, first of all, you guys know where he's from? Yeah? He's not English. He's not Spanish either. He's actually Italian. I believe he's from Genoa. So, why do the Genoese friends, whom he goes to first, saying, hey, I've got this idea to get to China, why does he say, not interested? The thing I most often hear, everyone thought back then that the world was flat. That's simply not true. People believed that it was round. They thought it was smaller than it was, but even the Greeks knew it was round, so what's up with that? Now, pop history is a thing. But then this begs the question, if they didn't believe it was flat, then why did the Genoese or the Italians say, not interested? Because who was it that was reaping a significant amount of the money coming from the Silk Road trade? The Italians. They already had a huge moneymaker. Why would they care about another one? Moving on, he goes to Portugal. Hey, I've got this great idea. They're not interested either. They found a way around Africa. He goes to Spain. Spain is interested. They don't have a way. Although, I've heard that he had to politic quite a long time to get the money to do it. So he eventually is given the money and the ships, 3 of them, to go west. The Northwest Passage, the way to get to Asia by going west, is going to be a very important thing. People are going to really focus on it because it's going to be hugely lucrative to find a way to do it. There is no way to do it. Not until we build the Panama Canal. Or unless you go around the world, which we'll talk about. Have yourself a good day. Don't forget to read both sections, and we'll talk more about it tomorrow. TTFN, talk off now.